breaking down the Game of Thrones Season 8 teaser. Game of Thrones fans got a heaping helping of pigeon pie earlier this week when a Game of Thrones Season 8 teaser aired right before the latest episode of True Detective. Now, besides giving us the next season's April 14th premiere date, the teaser also snuck in a few teeny tiny details that might give us a good idea of where they're headed with Game of Thrones' final season. Now, before we break it down, be sure to subscribe so that you can get all of our videos diving deep into everything DC, Marvel, Star Wars, and more. And last thing, because we're about to start this trailer breakdown, you should know that in today's episode, we'll be discussing potential spoilers, plot details, and speculation about Game of Thrones' final season. So if you want to see Season 8 completely unspoiled, you may want to hold the door on today's episode. For those of you that are still with us, let's break it down. The trailer starts with Jon Snow carrying a torch through the crypts of Winterfell, which, as we all know, are filled with the tombs of the members of House Stark. Though Jon Snow doesn't have the last name Stark, he was raised as the bastard son of Ned Stark, former Lord of Winterfell. However, we, the audience, learned his true parentage as son of Lyanna Stark, so either way, it makes sense that he would be there. In the teaser, he walks past a statue of Lyanna Stark, which is still holding the feather that Robert Baratheon placed in the statue's hands all the way back in the Game of Thrones pilot. The feather was also seen in Season 5 when Sansa Stark picked it up off of the floor of the crypt while she was having a conversation with Peter Baelish. In the teaser, the feather blows out of the statue's hands before landing on the floor of the crypt, which definitely symbolizes that things might be getting a little crazy for the Stark family in Season 8. We then see Sansa also strolling through the crypts of Winterfell. She passes a statue of her mother, Catelyn Stark, who we last saw getting her throat slashed by Black Walder back in Season 3's infamous Red Wedding. After a quick shot of a confident-looking Arya Stark walking through the crypt, we return to Jon Snow passing a statue of the good old patriarch of House Stark, Ned. As Jon looks at the statue, we hear a voiceover clip from Season 1 of Ned saying, "You are a Stark. You might not have my name, but you have my blood." This tells us that in Season 8, we can expect to see Jon Snow learn more about his actual bloodline and accept finally who he really is. Then we close on Jon, Arya, and Sansa meeting in the crypt before seeing statues of themselves along a far wall. Gee, I wonder what this is foreshadowing. Death is my guess. It's worth noting that this is a reunion of sorts for Arya and her brother Jon, since they haven't seen each other since Season 1, and also noticeably absent is the single other living Stark, Bran. We know he and his developing powers as the Three-Eyed Raven are probably going to feature heavily in Game of Thrones Endgame. So his absence here feels especially noticeable. Anyway, while the Starks look at their own creepy statues symbolizing that they're probably not going to survive much longer, Jon's torch blows out as an icy fog, surely symbolizing the White Walkers enters the crypt, and we close on the Starks with their swords drawn ready for battle. So besides telling us that after 7 seasons, winter is finally here, what else does this teaser tell us about the next season of Game of Thrones? Well, Nerdist's own Michael Walsh has a theory, and let's just say it doesn't look too good for the Starks. In an article posted on Nerdist.com this week, Walsh suggests that we will most likely see Winterfell fall to the White Walkers. With the White Walkers making great time now that they've made it past the wall, Winterfell has got to be one of the first places in the Seven Kingdoms that they plan on attacking. Last April, Game of Thrones assistant director Jonathan Quinlan posted a letter from the show's producers thanking them for shooting a Season 8 battle scene that took 55 days to complete. Many fans suspect that they're referring to the Battle of Winterfell. Keeping in mind the geography of Westeros, the White Walkers' battle at Winterfell has to take place early in the season, and if the White Walkers were defeated at Winterfell, that'd make for a very boring final few episodes of the series. With each episode of the final season reportedly being nearly feature film length, they're going to need a lot of plot to pad this season out, and it just makes sense that Winterfell will be taken over by the White Walkers early in the season, and then the remaining episodes will be spent with any surviving heroes doing everything that they can to keep the White Walkers from taking over all of the Seven Kingdoms. Walsh also made a few other connections in the article. The first Game of Thrones Season 8 teaser showed us a map of Westeros being covered by ice, with Winterfell being one of the locations on the map to get the deep freeze treatment. It's believed that Winterfell was built on the location where humans originally defeated the White Walkers in the early days of Westeros, and having the White Walkers take that location back would be a huge moral victory for everyone's favorite icy boys. Granted, this is all speculation, and we won't know the actual fate of Winterfell until Thrones' next season comes out in April, but one thing's for certain, things aren't looking too good for House Stark. But what do you folks think? Does this teaser make you even more excited for Game of Thrones' final season? Do you think the White Walkers have what it takes to take over Winterfell? And is it crazy that HBO is dropping the last season of Game of Thrones so close to the release of Avengers Endgame? Let's discuss. Be sure to like, subscribe, and mash that little bell to get notified every time we go live with the show or drop a new video. And if you want even more Game of Thrones, check out this week's Nerdist News Edition, where we ask Littlefinger actor Aidan Gillen how he thinks Game of Thrones will end. Also, what's up with those UFOs? Nerdist News Edition drops every weekend on YouTube and Facebook.